Hi, everybody. Welcome to Leadership Labs, a brand new online experience created for marketplace leaders who want to hone their skills, add more value to their organizations, and do a better job inspiring the people they work with. If that's you, you are in for a real treat because to get things kicked off, I've invited my friend Patrick Lencioni to talk to us for just a few minutes about his brand new assessment tool called Working Genius, a simple way to discover how to add the most value to your team and a simple way to discover what you should avoid doing at all costs because you're just not that good at it. Now, you may know Pat from one of his 11 fantastic books, which include The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Advantage, or his newest book, The Motive. Pat is also one of the founders of the Table Group, and he's actually one of the pioneers of the organizational health movement. So here's Patrick Lencioni discussing 6 types of working genius. And make sure to stick around afterwards, and I'll tell you how you and your team can take advantage of this helpful and valuable resource. Here's Pat.
Hi, I'm Pat Lencioni, and I'm very excited to be with you all to tell you about a project I've worked on recently that's more exciting to me than anything I've done in more than 20 years. In fact, one of my colleagues, when we finished the initial day of talking about this, said, this is going to be bigger than the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I actually agree now. And that's because what I'm going to go over with you is a very simple and fast way to discover the God-given gifts that you have, your talents, those things that give you great energy and joy. And it will allow you to change the way you work, to pursue a different job or career, or to better understand how you fit into a team and work with others. It's a very powerful tool, and I couldn't be more excited to go over it with you. Now, at the end of the day, though, one of the most beautiful things about this tool is that it allows us to avoid feeling unnecessary and inappropriate guilt about ourselves when we're not good at something. And it allows us to avoid making unfair and unnecessary judgments of others when they're good at something or not good at something. It really helps us understand how we need one another, whether we're working at a church or in a company or even in our home with our spouse and our family. So I'm so excited to be here, and let's dive in and talk about the 6 types of working genius. Now, as it turns out, there are 6 different activities or skills that are required to get anything done, whether it's a project or a program or running an organization. And without all 6 of them, something's going to be missing and it's going to be a problem. Well, each of us has 2 God-given talents, 2 of those 6. And this, again, is where we get our energy and joy. And to the extent that we can spend as much time as possible using those gifts, the happier we're going to be in our work and the more contribution we're going to make. But then again, there's 2 things of those 6 that I would call our working frustration. They're things that we can't stand doing. They drain us of our energy and joy, and we need to understand those too. So we have 2 working geniuses, 2 working frustrations, and in the middle, the last 2 are what we call your 2 working competencies. You can do them fairly well, but they don't feed you. So if you have to do them too often or too much in your career or in your life, you're eventually going to get burned out. So let's talk about those 6 working geniuses now so that you can better understand this model and they can go about changing your life at home, at work, and in anything else you do. The first genius is what we call the genius of wonder. That's the W. The genius of wonder is something that people who have it don't even realize it's a genius, but it's critical in any endeavor. This is the person who has patience and the ability to ponder big picture things or to look at the environment and think, what's going on here? Is there more potential possible? Is there something wrong? People with the genius of wonder like to ask the question, why and why not? And they do not mind sitting in that and thinking and speculating and asking questions. This is the first part of any endeavor. In fact, when we started this project around the 6 types of working genius, it was one of my colleagues, Amy, who's our co-founder of the firm, who started the whole thing by saying, Pat, why are you the way you are? And what is going on with you? And I said to her, I don't know, but I really want to figure it out. The genius of wonder is the first stage in anything coming about. And when people are asking that question, why, It's so easy to say, why are you always questioning things? And in fact, it's because they have the God-given genius of wonder. But of course, that's not enough. And not every moment in the process of doing a project or a program at an organization requires the genius of wonder. Sometimes that's not appropriate, but it's really critical when it is. The second working genius is what we call the genius of invention. That's the person who takes the problem or the issue that the wanderer sees and says, let me come up with a new solution. Let me invent something. Let me create something novel and fresh and new, starting from scratch. People with this genius are often called the geniuses, but all 6 types are genius. This is just the genius that loves to come up with something new. This is one of mine. And I just love it when somebody comes to me and says, I don't know what to do. Do you have a new idea for me? So this is a really important part of any organization, but it's not always appropriate. If a person comes to me at the end of a project and wants me to help them do something, I will often try to invent something and they'll say, no, this is not a time for the invention genius. I need you to help me with something else. So we always need to understand that just because we have a genius, it doesn't mean that every moment is the appropriate time to use it. So the person with the genius of invention comes up with a new idea. The problem is that new idea might not be a great one. See, they need somebody with the genius of discernment, the D. The person with the genius of discernment is really good at evaluating other people's ideas or concepts or issues. They have gut feel and instinct. They're good at looking at lots of variables at once, almost without realizing it. It's not about data. It's really more about seeing patterns. And people with the discernment genius are great at making judgments and great at providing advice that takes into account a whole host of variables that they could never process in a linear way. These are people that just have good gut feel and instincts. And they're the one that turns to the person with the genius of invention and says, now that's a great idea. Or that's not sounding like it's going to work. Or here's a few things that we need to work on before we can say that it's done. Often the person with the genius of discernment works hand in hand in an iterative way with the person with the genius of invention to hone an idea and make it ready to go. And then, though, comes the next genius, the genius of galvanizing, the G. The genius of galvanizing is the one who says, if you guys think this is a great idea, I'm going to get people excited. I'm going to recruit people. I'm going to inspire them. I'm going to gather people around and we're going to get things moving. I'm going to create momentum because something has to be done. And I love pushing people to move. The genius of galvanizing is critical in bridging the gap between assessing something and actually making it happen. So galvanizers love to do that. As it turns out, and I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes, how this idea came about, I am not someone with the genius of galvanizing, and yet I was doing it for a long time in my career, and it wasn't until we came up with this model just 5 months ago that I realized I needed to do less of that, empower other people to do it so that I could focus on the things that God put me on earth to do. Okay, the galvanizer galvanizes, but they need somebody with the next genius, the 5th genius, and it's the genius of enablement. It's the E. Now, enablement is one of those words that people say, well, you shouldn't enable people. Well, they're talking about around addictions or disorders or dysfunction. But enablement is a good thing when we're enabling people to do something important. And that's what a person with this genius has. Now, the people that have this genius, they're the ones that come alongside and say, I know what you need and I'm going to help you. You're asking for my support and I know exactly how I can do that. And I'm going to help you on the terms that you need. The problem is people with this genius often discount their contribution. They think they're just nice. They think they're just a pushover. But in fact, this is a real genius. And I will tell you this, and as a follower of Jesus, it's hard for me to admit this, I don't have this genius. When my wife asks me to do something, it's impossible for me not to want to invent a new solution or to discern whether or not that's what she really needs. And she says, can you just stand in the corner and when I give you things in the garage, just take them outside? And I'm like, but wait, why do you want to do that? And I think there's a better way. I drive her crazy. It's really difficult for me to support and enable what she's trying to do on her terms. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have to do it sometimes. It's just not natural for me and easy for me. People with the genius of enablement take an idea that someone's galvanized and get it started. They provide that critical help and support. I actually once worked with a church-based organization where nobody had the genius of enablement. Everybody wanted to invent something or galvanize or discern. Nobody was actually coming along. And people would say, why does nobody help me around here? And it wasn't until we did the Working Genius that they realized none of us have the genius of enablement. So you're not a bad Christian if you don't have this. It's just a gift. Now there's the final genius, the sixth one, which is the genius of tenacity, the T. The person with the genius of tenacity isn't motivated by helping necessarily. They're motivated by finishing, by getting it done, by taking it across the finish line and seeing the impact that it has on what they're trying to do. These people literally get energized and motivated by finishing things and crossing the finish line. I don't have this one at all. In fact, when I write a book, I love the beginning of the process, and I write it, and then the end is usually terrible. And my editor, who has tenacity, says, I'm not letting you out of this room until you finish this book right. It's just not natural for me to want to end things and to see things through in that last 20 or 30%. People with the genius of tenacity do this because they're wired that way. God gave them a desire to see things through and to see the impact. And it's a critical genius on any team. Now, as I said before, I want you to know how I came up with this idea, because whenever I hear about a model like this, I think, were you just sitting around trying to come up with something new? And most of the books I write and most of the models I come up with, including this one, come about somewhat by accident. I wasn't really sitting there thinking about it. So this one came about just as my office came back from our COVID shutdown about 3 months into the pandemic. We were sitting in my office and I was actually doing a webinar for a bunch of pastors and their teams around how to better run their churches. And I was kind of motivating them and doing all this stuff. And then after it was over, I had a Zoom call with the staff that was serving those pastors to give them feedback about how it went and to try to manage them and motivate them. And then after it was over, I turned to Amy, the co-founder sitting next to me, and I said, hey, I have a new idea. It's for our podcast, and I think it could do this and this. And that's when she said, because she's a wonderer, she said, why are you like this? What makes you be this way? And I said to her, I don't know, but some of it I love, some of it I don't like at all, and I'm exhausted, and I have been for 20 years. 4 hours later, I'm not exactly sure what happened in those 4 hours. 4 hours later, we had a whiteboard with 6 words on it, 6 concepts. And we said, I think this is what happens. And I'm good at these two, but I don't like this one. This galvanizing one drives me crazy. And we said, wow, this is actually something. Well, one of our consultants saw that whiteboard and we explained it to him. And this was the first day that we came up with this. The next morning, he was working with the CEO of a company who was really struggling in his role and in his team. And so the consultant said, wait a second, I learned something just last night. I saw it on a whiteboard. And he sketched it up there for him. And the CEO got tears in his eyes. He was overwhelmed emotionally. And he said, this is what is wrong right now. This is what's driving me crazy. I finally understand it. And that's the beauty of this model, is so many people, after they take the assessment and read the report, say, finally, I understand that I'm just not good at that, and I don't have to be, but I have to know people that are so I can work with them. And now I have a gift that sometimes I thought was a weakness, but it's actually a strength. I just need to put myself in a job or on a team or in a role that fully leverages that. This can be such a powerful differentiator in a marriage, on a team, or in an individual's career. My wife and I went through this with her, and we both looked at our working geniuses. And we have some similarities, some differences. One of the things we have in common is neither of us has the genius of tenacity. Neither of us likes to finish things or go all the way to the end. We get easily distracted and move on to the next thing. Well, you can imagine in 29 years of marriage, how many times that has created tension for us, and how easy it is for us to judge each other. I mean, I never judge her, but she judges me. No, that's not true. But how easy it is for us to judge each other and say, how come you didn't do that? And we looked at this and we said, God did not give us the genius of tenacity, so we better figure out how to organize ourselves so that we can get these things done, utilize some outside resources, and stop being frustrated at one another and even frustrated with ourselves because we thought, are we just lazy? But the answer is no. We just have different geniuses. So this is such an exciting, easy tool for people to use to discover why God put you on earth. Now, I love all the assessments out there, and I've done the Myers-Briggs and DISC and everything else. The thing about this one, though, it really tells you what you should be doing on a day-to-day level in terms of your tasks or activities. You know, I went back and thought about the first job I had out of college. It was supposed to be the best job in America, literally. People said, this is the #1 job, and somehow I got it, and I was miserable. 2 years later, I survived longer than some of my colleagues. 2 years later, I left, and I felt like a failure. I was not at the top of my class. I should have been enjoying it. They were paying us a lot of money, and I looked back and I realized it required somebody who had enablement, do whatever we tell you to do and don't ask questions, and tenacity, and just get it done on time without any mistakes. Those were my 2 working frustrations. Of course I was gonna struggle in that job. Today I look back, I've even reorganized my company after 23 years. I realized I'm not a galvanizer and it was exhausting me. I looked at the people on my team and I have a guy on my team who loves to galvanize. I essentially had him do the galvanizing after I had invented and discerned, and now I can actually breathe and enjoy the day-to-day experience even more. Now that doesn't mean we sometimes don't have to do things outside of our genius. Of course we do, at home and at work. But we don't want to put ourselves in a position where our joy and our success and the majority of our time is spent doing things that God did not wire us to do. Let me give you one last understanding of what the difference between your genius, your competency, and your frustration is. I want you to imagine 6 cups of coffee. Your working genius are those 2 cups of coffee. You could pour coffee into those and put an airtight lid on them, and it would hold that heat for a long, long time. This is your working genius because the energy is going to be there. At the end of a long day of doing things in your working genius, you're going to say, I'm kind of tired, but I could keep doing it because I love it. That's your working genius. The coffee cups in the middle are your working competencies. You pour the coffee in, but there's no lid on it. It's going to hold the heat for a while. You can do that. Eventually, it's going to dissipate. And if you left it outside, it would evaporate. Okay, your working frustrations, you pour coffee into these cups and there's a hole in the bottom. And immediately it drains out. It's hard to hold any energy at all. If we don't know what our genius, our competency, and our frustration are, how can we maximize the commitment to our families and our teams and our churches? We need to understand these things. And in a very short way, you can figure it out and begin the process of talking to others around you so that you can be the person that God wanted you to be, and you can appreciate the people around you and who God wants them to be. So I hope this is helpful for you. Again, I'm so excited. I love hearing stories. We've already heard back. This has been around for just a little over a month, and more than 25,000 people have taken it. And the breakthroughs they have are extraordinary. So I thank God for this opportunity to share this with you, and I hope you find it helpful.
So isn't it great to know that you're a genius at something? And if you'd like to know exactly what your genius is, I have some great news. Pat is offering the Working Genius Assessment Tool to us for 50% off. If you'll just go to the link at the bottom of your screen and then type in user code Andy, which was not my idea. Anyway, just type in the user code Andy. You'll get 50% off the assessment. And feel free to share this code with your team or maybe even members of your family. If you'd like to hear more from Pat on this topic, make sure you check out my February and March episode of the Leadership Podcast, where we will take a deep dive into the working genius paradigm. Thanks for joining us at our very first Leadership Lab. We will see you next time.